Good evening, my ghouls of the night. It's that time of year again. A time to splurge ourselves with candy and celebrate the creepy, kooky, mysterious, and spooky. And in the spirit of the season, the next chapter in our boss miniseries is dedicated to the mistresses of dark magic. Which means...
A witch! A witch!
Yep, believe it or not, there have been quite a few witchy bosses out there, and today we're paying tribute to the deadly dames of the arcane arts. What are our qualifications? Well, we're looking for the bosses that really rock the witch aesthetic in one way or another, challenge us with a grand and fun enough battle, or just have an interesting character. Oh, and we're giving more points to those that get the closest to the idea of a witch, so fae, succubi, and genies don't really count. Basically, no one from witch. Sorry, it's some mythology nut in me. Seems like nowadays whenever anyone mentions Resident Evil Village, the first deadly dame they think of is Lady Dimitrescu. And gee, I can't imagine why.
Everybody turns around and says, "Hello, nurse."
But since Lady Traxavland is a vampiric mutant and not a witch, we'll be focusing on the one she serves, Mother Miranda. She is the head of the Four Houses cult and ruler of the titular village. Admittedly, she's more of an alchemist than a magician, but she also has the power to shapeshift. Spoiler warning, she disguised herself as Mia at the very beginning and took the form of an old hag to spy on the villagers. She actually has a bigger part in the franchise than we realized. For starters, she's the one who created Evelyn, the bioweapon and main baddie from Biohazard, and actually inspired Oswald to found the Umbrella Corporation. That's right. The bioweapons, the T-virus, the whole setting for the franchise was all indirectly made to be by Mother Miranda.
Who's been pulling every evil string?
It's been Agatha all along.
Even though she's the greater scope villain, she didn't physically appear until Village, where she used arcane biological components to try and resurrect her lost daughter, Eva. Aw, that's actually kind of a touching goal. Except she was kind of a crappy parent who used her adopted kids as guinea pigs for her experiments, tried to use your daughter as a vessel, and her big revival plan didn't even work in the end. So, yeah, after her big old plan doesn't work, she goes on the attack as the final boss of the game, and she's pulling out all the stops, evolving with every phase becoming more and more monstrous and using geomancy to try and snuff you out with mold. Thankfully, it's not too hard to figure out how to take her out. Just have the right guns at the ready, keep a safe distance, and shoot her until she's out of the picture. Was kinda hoping it'd take a bit more to beat her, especially given how enormous her role in the franchise really is, or heck, maybe she doesn't even die right here. But in the end, it was still a fun final brawl against the underlying mastermind. If we ever see a Resident Evil 9, this is gonna be a tough act to follow. Well, time to talk about that game where Scrooge McDuck has a shovel. Hey Shovel Knight, I feel like we talk more about a darker themed game starring a knight, but this game is still super solid in its own right and just as difficult. Take its main antagonist, for example, the illustrious and powerful Enchantress. So, who is this powerful foe? Where did she come from? Well, some spoilers ahead, naturally. Originally, she existed in the amulet that had power over life and death. An amulet that was sought out by two pairs of adventurers, the Shovel and Shield Knight and the adventurers Donovan and Luan. Eventually, Shield Knight comes face to face with the other adventurers. Despite her warnings about the amulet, Donovan attacks her and they have a vicious fight. The fight causes the floor to cave in and Donovan and Luan fall to their deaths. Shield Knight, weak after her fight with Donovan, gets overwhelmed by the amulet and taken over, eventually becoming the Enchantress we see throughout the game and different campaigns. She has fought as late-stage bosses in Plague of Shadows and Spectre of Torment, as well as the final boss of Shovel of Hope. The battle with her is pretty simple. She will shoot you with fireballs that you need to deflect back at her to damage. If you're able to damage her directly with your shovel, potions, or scythe, then even better. The ground below you is malleable, so if you hit it, it will dissolve. And she can destroy it herself with her attacks. There are differences between the three fights with her, but they are mostly based on the platforms you are on. So just keep an eye on your footing. Beating her as Plague or Spectre Knight will result in a separate final fight for them, but for Shovel Knight, he has a special second form to contend with, the Remnant of Fate, the Enchantress's true form. With Shield Knight's help, you need to dodge her projectiles and floor-destroying moves and use Shield Knight's, shield to gain air and attack her head. Eventually, with your partner's help, you will defeat the almighty Enchantress once and for all. The Enchantress as a villain and boss are pretty simple, but she does do some interesting things in the stories of Spectre and Plague Knight, as I would recommend looking at. Overall, she is your standard witch boss and villain, but she does make Shovel Knight an enjoyable ride regardless. When it comes to the colorful roster of Mario villains, Cacletta doesn't seem to be talked about a lot compared to the others. Sure, her dialogue isn't as rambunctious and quirky as our Mustard in Command, but she does know how to make a name for herself. Casting jinxes on a bunch of people, performing mutilative experiments that destroy a person's identity, and even taking over the Koopa fleet after she possessed Bowser.
Yeah, that certainly leaves an image in your head, but
How does she fare on her own? Right as you start the fight against her, she immediately launches voids through the floor, which can damage you severely and inflict a weight effect on you. Her other attacks include a series of lightning strikes and a clone move, which, if you get it wrong, will spawn a swarm of bats heading towards you. Since you're pretty much required to jump over to dodge these attacks, you definitely don't want that weight status anywhere near the bros. Regardless of which battle you have with her though, all her themes are pure ecstasy, with booming digital organs and percussion throughout. The remix of her character theme in the first fight is by far the most energetic one, which fits the strength of the mid-game encounter to a T. Cacletta is a solid villain overall, with a persistent presence and a fun boss fight. While there are bigger and more competent Mario villains out there, there's nothing wrong with paying tribute to the malevolent Bean Witch either. If, say, the first fight was too easy for you, just wait until you reach the final battle against her soul. Now that's a fight that'll make you beg for mercy.
Ooh, I'm dying!
She got magic and spells. All kind of hoodoo.
Something about swamps, alligators, and voodoo magic just mixes so well together. Meet Ms. Ruby, the voodoo priestess of the Fiendish Five. She actually has a kind of sad backstory. Everyone was afraid of her when she was little, so she could only make friends with the dead. But when she got older, she turned to a life of crime and uses her mystic abilities to make the world suffer for her loneliness. You want to feel bad for her, but then you remember she helped rob and murder Cooper's parents, so not too much sympathy from me. That being said, Ms. Ruby really rocks the voodoo witch motif. The arena her level takes place in is spooky and murky, once again highlighting the game's knack for atmosphere, and her house is littered with body parts. Literally. And she herself is cold and sadistic, eager to watch the sneaky ringtail breathe his last dying breath. Her ultimate end goal? Command an army of the dead to conquer Mexico. Ironic. Simple, spooky, and to the point. Gotta respect the witch who knows what she wants. However, she doesn't really get her hands dirty and opts to toss spells at you from a distance, which leads us to her boss fight, which is a rhythm game. As you slowly move closer to her, she tests your reflexes by chucking barrages of mojo magic at you, and the only way to dodge is to press the corresponding button with each blast. You gotta do this fast because these mystical fireballs do pack a punch, which is especially frustrating when your only life force is a horseshoe. Then when you finally reach Ms. Ruby, swipe at her to lower her health and repeat the same process until she's finally down for the count. Just a weird little note, but each button attack makes a specific sound that spells out "dig that voodoo." If you're an immature little babu, and you know you are, don't try to hide it, you can pretend that Sly and Ruby are actually cussing each other out as they dance.
Do you kiss your mother with that mouth?
While not quite the magical brawl I kind of hoped it'd be, I really like the unique sense of rhythm gaming for this particular boss fight, and Ms. Ruby flaunts the eerie demeanor that makes her a memorable necromancer. Sadly though, she's a one-off villain after getting sentenced to life in jail. And hey, who knows? Maybe she'll finally make some friends in the big house?
The stench of brooding and overcomplicated plots has permeated this air. It's Final Fantasy.
And among the Final Fantasies, we finally get to talk about the one that gets overlooked, even when we talk about bad Final Fantasy games. Kind of weird I don't talk about 8 that much, since its opening is one of my favorites and its intro theme used to be my intro theme. And oh, nostalgia. Anyways, witches in Final Fantasy VIII. So let's talk about Ultimisha, everyone's favorite time-traveling witch. Well, she doesn't really time travel in the normal sense. She has her consciousness sent back through time to possess someone in the current time of Final Fantasy VIII. In this case, sent back in time to the sorceress Adia Kramer. And from there, she transports her mind to other sorceresses, such as the ancient sorceress Adele and 8's heroine Renoa. And we fight her in different forms, and then we get ourselves transported to the future and fight her true form, and oh gosh, I just realized where Dream Drop Distance and KH3 got their plots from. She is fought a bit throughout the game, usually as either Adia or Adele. The fight we'll be focusing on is her final one in Ultimisha Castle. When you finally confront her in the Master Room, she challenges you in her true form. The first phase forces you to use 3 random characters at will. If they are KO'd and not revived in a certain amount of time, she will remove them and replace them with another. She can also insta-kill summoned Guardian forces and use spells that give status effects. The second phase is against the Guardian Forced Griever, the ultimate GF that Squall brought up and named earlier in the game that is manifested and summoned by Ultimisha. It doesn't do anything special except the move Shockwave Pulsar that can do massive damage and not countered with Shell, or with a summoned GF to take most of the damage. With Griever defeated, Ultimisha fused herself with the GF to become even more powerful. She can use spells like Ultima, Meteor, Quake, and Tornado, or use her ultimate attack, Great Attractor, when she summons 2 Helix enemies to boost her. And then we have her final form. Strong spells? Check. Letting allies disappear from battle? Check. Reduce the entire party's HP to 1? Check. Yeah, she's tough. You can stop her strongest spell, Hell's Judgment, by destroying her lower half, but considering that the game scales all difficulty to your level, and she can dissolve your collected spell base with Hell's Judgment, you need to be careful or else you need to start all over. There are a bunch of other story points I can make about Ultimisha, but with how long this entry already is, let's end this here. Despite how weird 8's story can get, Ultimisha is still an interesting antagonist with a difficult but satisfying final fight. And she's still best Final Fantasy sorcerer. Eat your heart out, Zandy.
Emerging from the ranks of shapeshifters comes our next entry, Flemeth, the Witch of the Wilds from the Dragon Age series.
When we first encountered her, she seemed like just another snarky old lady. Well, she is, but she's also over 600 years old and harboring the spirit of Mythal, the great protector of motherhood and justice. She's a super powerful mage and shapeshifter able to morph into an enormous dragon. Yeah, I'm pretty sure she and Maleficent took the same transfiguration class. There's also a rumor that she got her immortal youth by possessing her own adopted daughters. There's debate on whether this is true or not, but if it is, she can't really possess someone who's unwilling, which means, oh gosh, they knew what they were in for the moment they were born. It's pretty obvious Flemeth's an amazing character with an awesome background, enjoyably ambiguous personality, and an integral role in the lore. But what about her boss fight? Well, she's an elite boss in the original Dragon Age Origins, and her battle is, yeah, to be honest, it's not really exciting. Just throw what you can at the big old dragon until her health runs out. Not to say it's a bad fight, because it really isn't. It's just kinda basic. Honestly, since she already borrowed Maleficent's dragon shtick, she could have used a few of her tips on how to bulldoze her opponents. While being an actual boss isn't really her strong suit, what really cements Flemeth's place on this list is her character, her snarkiness, how integrated into the lore she is, her ambiguity, and how she's a mistress at cheating death. Even after you slay her in the boss fight, she just makes a comeback in the next 2 games where she naturally steals the show every single time. Well, it looks like her number finally came up in Inquisition. I almost guarantee you that somehow, some way in Dragon Age 4, though, just in case, maybe don't hold me to that. As a series that's been going since 1996, the Touhou project features an absolutely massive cast of characters. Pretty much any mythical creature can be a Touhou character. Mermaids? Check. Kitsune? Check. Death gods? Take a wild guess. Seriously, Touhou practically invented the 1,000-year-old lolly. Among these characters is Marissa Kirasame. First appearing as a boss in the story of Eastern Wonderland, Marissa would then go on to be playable in each mainline entry since. She also made no shortage of appearances as a boss, but which appearance made the list?
That hurt me more than it hurt you.
Well, why not Great Fairy Wars? Great Fairy Wars is unique among other entries in the series since you have the ability to freeze bullets. This adds a new layer to the gameplay as it's not just about dodging. You'll have to master this new mechanic to stand a chance against fighting Marissa as the extra boss. Right off the bat, you have her lasers to contend with. These require you to freeze the space to create a shield. Things only get more complex with fire bullets added into the mix. These can't be normally frozen outside of using your bombs, so you really need to manage your resources carefully. Being an extra boss, the battle with Marissa is incredibly long. It's as much a test of your skill as it is your endurance. With all that said, Marissa is admittedly far from a dynamic character. While no means bland, there's just not really a whole lot to her. And again, this is Toho. Most of the storylines can be summed up as something is causing a disturbance.
Kick its ass.
As the games take place in a medieval fantasy world, the Zelda series is the ideal setting to find witches and sorceresses alike. There's definitely several notable witch characters throughout the series, but as far as bosses go, we all remember the most iconic one.
Well, actually two.
Kotake and Kome are witch sisters who serve as Ganondorf's most devoted commanders, particularly in Ocarina of Time and the Oracle games. On top of that, they're also his surrogate mothers who lead the Gerudo tribe in secrecy. Together they form a deadly magician duo of fire and ice known as Twin Rova. They've made several appearances throughout the series, sometimes even as friendly NPCs like in Majora's Mask. They're not short of other boss appearances either, including one in Cadence of Hyrule where they become a synth monitor. Yeah, I guess it works. Nonetheless, the battle everyone remembers the most is the Spirit Temple fight in Ocarina of Time. Throughout the dungeon, we find out that the Witch Sisters brainwashed the sage Naburu and made her an iron knuckle of their bidding. Naturally, that's one way to get you excited about confronting the sisters and making it personal with them. The witches each cast a spell of a particular element towards you, whether it be flames or frost. You can forget trying to damage them with your regular weapons because that won't do you any good. Instead, you gotta use the mirror shield to reflect each sister's attacks towards the other. Once they're damaged enough, they'll merge using their double dynamite attack to form a single entity, which made them younger for some reason. Here, you gotta absorb their magic several times in a row before launching it back at her and hitting her with your sword. But you're gonna wanna be careful with what you absorb, because if you had ice magic absorbed and tried to do the same to fire magic and vice versa, the damage that comes with that ain't gonna be super generous. On top of being a very enjoyable fight, we even get to see the witches die in probably the most comical way any Zelda villain can go out. I think that's what makes these two so memorable. Not only are they formidable witches that make good use of the fire and ice sorcery dynamic, but they're amongst the few side villains in Zelda with really entertaining personalities. Kirby Canvas Curse is of a decidedly different breed than many of the other games. Why? You can't directly control Kirby. You instead draw lines for him to roll on. This means this whole thing is far more of a puzzle platformer. Interestingly enough, there's an in-story justification for this. The main villain, Drossia, turned Dreamland and all of its inhabitants into a painting. Complete with the hat and cackle, she is the archetypical Halloween witch. Heck, she even has an organ theme. Being Canvas Cursed, the boss fight with her is a bit different. Specifically, you must take far more of a defensive approach to the fight rather than normal. Your main method of inflicting damage to her involves reflecting her magic attacks and rolling into her. In between these, she'll summon enemies and obstacles for you to contend with. And yes, since Drossia is the final boss, she, of course, has a second form. And yes, it is an eldritch abomination that will haunt your nightmares. Meet Drossia's Soul! This form takes a bit of a different approach, with most of your attacks now requiring you to reflect enemies back at her or tap her at the correct time. The fight is also really good from an artistic standpoint. Given that Drossia is a painting drawn to life, the game does a really good job selling that with all the colorful effects on her attacks. Plus, the whole melting thing really fits with the idea of witches growing insane from all the arcane power they hold. And of course, this wouldn't be Kirby without a blood-curdling death cry. Take it away, Drossia.
My ears bleed from the beauty.
John from Bayonetta, double, toil and trouble. She copies your moves, so you're in a muddle. Crystal Sage, Dark Souls 3. It can barely take a punch, so it compensates with teleporting and clone spells. Nui Baba, Fire Emblem Shadows of Valentia. The Illusionist got a stunning design update since the early days. Her stage is still the same though. For better or for worse. Widow Greenpaw, World of Warcraft. All she wanted was a little love, and to turn a bunch of travelers into jade statues. Is that so wrong? Come on, when it comes to video game witches, you don't get any more iconic and quintessential than Gruntilda. And how could you? On top of being absolutely hilarious, Grunty is a stand-up villain who does not care about your perception of logical thinking. She messes you up any way she wants to. Spells, game shows, and even rhyme-ridden roasts. Regardless of what game she's in, her boss fights always left an impact. Oh, okay, scratch that. The games that matter. But the one that absolutely nails the vibe of a witch boss goes to the final battle of Banjo-Kazooie. Throughout the fight, Grunty embodies the traditional elements you expect from a Halloween witch. Riding a broomstick, casting magic, and sure, throw a force field in there too, why not? Even the music screams witchy personality. The chaotic medley of instruments really represents the bombastic nature of the fight, all coupled with the battle scene taking place atop the green, cloudy roof of Grunty's lair. The fight overall has 5 phases, each with a different method to approach them with, whether it's by pecking the witch or firing eggs at her. The fight really does keep you on your toes and can provide a challenge if you're up for some serious beatdown. That being said, if you're not prepared to deal with some of Banjo-Kazooie's more, dated mechanics, this fight may be a bit too much. Grunty's body and projectile hitboxes can be hard to measure, which could lead to taking damage against her when you're not supposed to. There is still some fair difficulty. I mean, some parts like the beak bombing things have a high risk of getting you thrown off the battle scene if you miss, and freeing the Jinjos requires you to plant yourself into the ground, all the while taking Grunty's sporadic fireballs with little chance to read or dodge them if you're not careful. And yes, the boss does become a lot more manageable if you 100% the game to get all the upgrades and restockable ammo. But yeah, you don't even get to finish Grunty off yourself, Jinjo Ex Machina does it for you. So yeah, technically in a lot of ways, the 2v fight with the Hag 1 is better since the mechanics are more solid and the climax is a bit more satisfying. But why I'm not putting that on the list is this feels more like a witch battle. There's so much gravitating charm surrounding it with great set pieces, catchy music, and fun boss design. It really fortifies itself as the definitive witch boss. Sure, it's not the cleanest, but hey, in a cosmic sort of way, it kind of represents Grunty herself. She's cruel, cheap even, but that's part of the wickedness that comes with the sorceress of ILO Hags, who stops at nothing to take out her aggression on the bear and bird duo. And we'll continue to love her for that.
I'm Josh Scorcher, and I just got a new package. It's a music box that I ordered. And let's see how it is. Would you believe that this wasn't from a horror game?
Cut!
Hey everyone, this is Josh. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, and share the video around. Please check out my other social media like my Twitter, Twitch, and Tumblr. Check out my other channels such as Joshua Burner for reactions and other stuff, Dragon Fighter Gaming for tabletop, and Bob Equestria for cartoons. Consider checking below the video and donating to my Patreon, Streamlabs for my merchandise, or becoming a YouTube member. Thanks for watching.